Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Maurice Brown Comedy Show on Bog Radio in association with 24 Flicks. And we've got a couple of awesome comedians. The one you're looking at right now, we're going to bring her on out here first. As you know, at this stage, this is the Comedy in the Kingdom tour show, a tour I'm creating coming your way next summer. And that lady you're looking at right now, yeah, she's a part of it. She's based out of Nashville, a speaker, and she brings a great blend of comedy to everyday life. And if you want to see a comic who can make everybody laugh, from kids to older adults, with fresh and unique material, well, our guest is the one for you. She's the warm-up comic for the Mike Huckabee Show.
Sometimes.
And she has her own dry bar comedy special coming soon, and a friend to the Maurice Brown Comedy Show. You may have seen her on Breaking Down the Four Walls. With no further ado, please welcome to the show the very funny and talented Christy Conder. What's up, Christy? How are you?
Maurice, it's so good to see you.
It is good to see you as well, and you've got a lot of things going on right now in your comedy bag, a couple of which I've mentioned already concerning Mike Huckabee. Tell us a little bit about that.
That's a great gig. It's I just do the warm up occasionally when they ask me, and it's just 7 minutes of warming up an audience before the show starts. And so it's great to even be backstage, meet some of the guests that are on that show too. But my job is to go out there, make them laugh, and it's always a great time. Always a fun thing to do.
And you're also hooking up and doing some things with clean comedian Leslie Robb, correct?
Yes. Leslie Robb and I have been doing a couple of shows together, along with another friend of yours, June Colson. And so we have been doing stuff for some teachers, which is pretty fun. And it's a great opportunity to meet some of them. We were in Kentucky a couple weeks ago and going to be in Cleveland pretty soon. And it was just all teachers, and it was so much fun. The teachers were just ready to laugh and just have a good time. And it was a blast.
Well, I tell you right now, Leslie Robb and that teacher's tour is pretty incredible. And also, you've got a dry bar comedy special coming very soon. You're doing a lot of moving and grooving in comedy, and I cannot wait. You had a chance to go out to Provo, Utah, and do your comedy special out there. What was that like, being in that atmosphere?
That was amazing. I got to be on the show. They film all our shows separately, but it is with a live audience, and you go and it's a gig. It's a normal gig. They just happen to film it. So I was out there with Jeff Allen and John Branyan, and it was just an amazing thing to be on. And they were so professional, and the audience was great, and it was a beautiful area in Provo, Utah. And so it was an absolute blast. We did 2 shows in one night, which I think was one of the first times I'd ever done that, like back-to-back shows. So that was just a really amazing time. I can't wait for that to come out eventually, but it was really, really a cool experience.
Well, we're going to bring out our next comedian, who is also a part of the Comedy in the Kingdom tour. You may have seen this gentleman before, well known in the entertainment industry as Hollywood's top warm-up comic, a veteran of over 1,500 episodes of such shows as New Adventures of Old Christine. I think that's with Julia Louis-Dreyfus, Just Shoot Me, Becker, and the Drew Carey show. And he's also no stranger to the camera, as you may have seen him on Bananas comedy series, Showtime's The Jokes on Thee, VH1's Stand-Up Spotlight, Comic Strip Live, and a variety of roles on such sitcoms as Wings, I Love Wings, and Perfect Strangers, and a friend to the Maurice Brown Comedy Show. And again, part of the Comedy in the Kingdom tour coming your way next summer. With no further ado, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the very funny Robert G. Lee. What's up, Robert? How are you?
The late, the great. I mean, wait, no.
Very well, thank you. Wonderful to be here. Thank you.
No, yeah. Robert, thanks for being on the show, man. And you're doing a lot of comedy nowadays as well, and you're working on an album. Tell us about that.
Yeah, well, it's one of those. Well, I do a new project about every 3 or 4 years. This is my 10th comedy project. Used to be DVDs. Nobody buys those anymore. Now they're video projects to put on YouTube or Amazon.
Yeah.
I make a CD, and the CD, my last one, I tell everybody that God knew COVID was going to happen before we did, because I put my latest CD out to Sirius Radio, where we get residuals in September. COVID hit in March, and the residuals started coming in April. So 1 month later, after everything dropped out, my whole comedy career, all the TV warm up, all of it's gone, nothing left.
Yeah.
Knew it was going to happen, and he provided for us. So I'm doing my next album to put on Sirius Radio, and I'll make that into my own special to post wherever, so it's everything changes, but it still stays the same. You need an audience, you need to have people laughing, you need to work on your material. So I'll be doing that in 10 days, I guess, on the 14th and 15th in 2 different locations.
Wow, I love it. I absolutely love it. And you have a dry bar comedy special that fans can see the full special, and that was an awesome. We're going to play a snippet of your dry bar as well. Robert G. Lee and Christy Conder on the Maurice Brown Comedy Show on Bog Radio in association with 24 Flicks. So, okay, so we're clean comedians, and we're Christian comedians. We're comedians. We just happen to be comedians that are clean. And once you see us, we'll answer all of your questions about what we do and why we do what we do. So I want to start out with you, Christy Conder. You're a clean comic. You're a Christian comic. You're very funny.
Well, thank you.
What
I've learned it from Robert G. Lee.
Yeah, yes, of course you learned it from Robert G. Lee. What motivated you, Christy, to get started in comedy and clean comedy, for that matter? What motivated you to get involved?
I've just loved laughter my whole life, but I grew up listening to some Christian comedians, Mike Warnke and Isaac Airfreight, who was a Christian comedy troupe that put out albums. And I listened to those albums like other people listen to the Cosby album, which I listened to as well. And all those other albums that other people listen to, I would listen to those comedians and comic troupe, just over and over and over. And I loved to laugh. I loved to make my family laugh. I loved storytelling. I loved performing. And so, it just seemed like something I always wanted to try. And when we moved to Nashville, my husband said, "What is something you've always wanted to do?" And I said, "I've always wanted to try stand-up." So
wow. Yeah.
Just, he was supportive and said, "Go for it." And so, that's how I got started.
Well, that now have you, I'm guessing your answer to this question that I'm about to ask is no, but have you ever done secular comedy?
Well, it's how you define secular comedy. Like I have performed on the stage at Zanies here in Nashville, and done things that weren't necessarily in a church setting or anything like that. So in that respect, I have. It's not where I'm drawn to, but I have done it. So, but not exclusively. I haven't done that.
So
not like Robert, who's just all out there everywhere.
Well, no, we have clean comedians / Christian comedians that, when I say secular, I mean they've used profanity and they've gone.
Oh, okay. I was like, define secular.
They were on the other side, and then they came on to the right side, and they started doing it clean. I was just wondering if
Christy curses now, so
I was just wondering if you had any experiences on the other side.
No, you know what? That's just not who I am. It never was. It wasn't something it just wasn't me. And if I tried something like that, people would go, "What? Who's that?" I mean, it's just not me. So
I love that. I think being a part of secular shows where you may be surrounded or working with other comedians that are profane, hey, that's part, I think, of the Lord's work, being in those environments and just letting your routine speak for itself. People will get it, after a while. I did a show once, and a guy, said, "Look, man, I didn't even realize you weren't cursing. I was in the middle of profane comedians." He said, "I didn't even realize you weren't cursing. And then I appreciated the fact that you weren't after I did realize it, because there was no difference. Everybody was laughing just the same. And I appreciate it. So now I like that you've always been on the right side, Christy. A very good thing, but some haven't. And Robert, as I asked Christy that, I will turn it over to you. What motivated you, sir, to get started and stand up, specifically clean?
Well, I started off listening to Christy Conder, and that's what I did. And I wanted to be her, and so I followed her footsteps. But before that, so I grew up just listen, and it's one of those things you can't speak his name now, but Real Rosby, I listened to every single album, and what was great about his stand-up comedy, although he fell off the humanity train, is that here's a guy from Philadelphia, a black guy from Philadelphia, and I'm a white kid from Indiana, and we relate. And I knew from that point that, you know what, comedy is for everybody. You can make people laugh. And I just loved it. And so, but I did start off in the clubs in Los Angeles, and I was between the profane people. And it was in the mid 90s when I decided I was going to leave the clubs. That was my big decision. And I thought it was a big leap of faith, saying I couldn't relate to the people. I wasn't offended by being there. There were great people. I mean, Robin Williams was coming on later at night. It was just so many great people. But my material wasn't growing because the people in the audience couldn't relate to me. And so because I wasn't growing and my material wasn't growing, I said, that's it. I'm done. I'm just going to do churches. I don't even know if I can make a living in churches. I don't know so again, big leap of faith. And when I did it, I found my people. And it was like, oh, and it's not just that they don't want to hear cursing, but oh no, all the way from junior high school up to grandparents, people who have the same sensibility that I do, people who have families and love families and want to work for them. At the clubs, it was all single people, and we were foreplay. That's all we were. That's all the comics were. Get them lubed up and ship them out and bring in the next show. Churches, you can make a difference. You can touch people and you lift people up, and it just became the difference. And that's where I've been for the now. I've worked for my church. I've done TV warm up, but it all is clean comedy. But still, I mean, I do clubs today, not a lot, but I do them. And I did one this last weekend, and I come home and just tell my wife they're just head shakers, and they profane the name of Jesus, and they're lying. And it's like, you're making myths truths. Why do you continue with this? But it's a battle out there. And so, as you said, Maurice, people appreciate it. They really do. I've left many a show, and people come up to me and said, I appreciate what you do. Thank you so much for doing it, because you're the one light spot in just a very dark place. And it's not my preferred way to work, but when you get called in, you do it, and it's fun. But my preference is always clean shows.
Yeah. And I had a guy who asked me one time, and I said, I'm a clean comedian. He goes, what does that mean? And I said, well, I don't curse, or I don't talk about, inappropriate things on stage sometimes, or sometimes. But then he said, what do you do? Just tell dad jokes the whole time? It's like,
there you go.
No.
Yeah.
So I just thought that was really, he had no concept of the fact that you could do that. And I was like, that's just sad.
Well, it's really interesting because I used to produce comedy shows in Washington, D.C. before COVID, and they were pretty successful. And I got to the point where I would invite secular comedian friends to come be a part of my clean show, give them an opportunity to try to do that. And it's amazing how they can't cross over. Like, even if they tried, they can't do it. They're thinking that they're doing it right because they don't use profanity, but it's also subject matter. I had one comic that was so bad with the subject matter. My wife looked at me and said, get him off the stage right now.
They just don't get it. And Christy was just on Dry Bar, and a lot of dirty comics, secular comics, have done Dry Bar sets.
I was thinking the same thing.
But their rhythm is such that they just know, okay, I'm going to replace the F-bomb with this.
Yeah.
The jokes never work. They don't land because the only way they're helped out is by the curse word, and their rhythm is off, and they can't quite do it. They do it, but I always that's not your normal pace. That's not your normal. You don't land on that joke that way. So, and
you see them hesitate when you watched enough of it. You see them hesitate, and you go, "Yep, that's where that word was supposed to be."
Yeah. Well, some of them literally cannot do it. And, obviously stopped that experiment. But actually, I have one friend that's doing a national tour right now, and he's doing really, really well. I won't say his name, but I worked with him, and he did well for a while, and he just sort of slid back into that profane mode. And my wife had to give him a good talking to, and we don't really work with him anymore. Great, a very good comic. And what motivated me to get him involved was I saw the good in him. I saw the good natured aspect of his personality. I would be thinking to myself when he's doing his normal show, why is he even cursing? He's a good guy. I don't know why he's doing that, but you got to represent your peeps.
And it's easier.
You got to appeal to the people you think are your friends or whatever, and he's doing really well, and I don't want to belittle him, and I certainly won't mention his name, but some people just can't do it.
Well, and then the myth for women is that you have to be filthy to be funny because you're a woman.
Yeah.
So that's the challenge for women sometimes, is that they think, you get certain comedians that will just be even filthier than the men because they feel like they're starting at a lower level. And so they've got to come up and to just get even with the men, which is really sad.
It is sad because I see a lot of good female comedians going to the gutter, trying to outdo the men when it comes to profanity. And it's just like, man, I don't know why you're funny. I don't know why you're doing that. But a lot of females fall into that trap. And so, but a lot of people in general that think they're funny or want to be a great comic, they think they have to do it the way that Richard Pryor did it, or Eddie Murphy did it, or Dave Chappelle, or whatever, and George Carlin, and whatever, and which are some of the greats, but they were authentic for one, not justifying their approach, but they were being authentic, like they were telling their truth. They just happen to be using a lot of profanity, but these copycats out here, they're not telling a truth. They're going for the low-hanging fruit, and they're trying to emulate something they think is funny, but it's not authentic. And
really good point. I think Chris Rock is a great example of that. When Chris Rock is just killing, and he does kill, and it's like the words are just part of it. And I can't take that away from him because he makes me fall on the floor laughing. But other people, I like the way you say low hanging fruit. It's like, this is the rhythm, and I can't really find a punchline here, so I'll just drop in this word, that word, or I'll do shock humor and I'll get a laugh that way. And it's like, you're just cheating. You don't understand. Chris Rock is a poet. You're cheating, and they don't see it.
Right.
They don't see it. And ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to the Maurice Brown Comedy Show, Comedy in the Kingdom Tour, on Bog Radio in association with 24 Flicks, with comedians Christy, Conder, and Robert G. Lee. As we're talking about all of that, stand-up comedy, the state of stand-up comedy in 2023. Christy, I guess I'll start with you. What is your
last time? Make Robert go.
Well, ladies first, Christy. Ladies first. So what is your view of the current state of stand-up in 2023?
What's really interesting is when we went to do the teachers tour, it's everybody came in saying, I just need to laugh. I just need to laugh. And then when they left, they were like, oh my gosh, this was so great for the soul. So desperately needing something to laugh about. And we made a point of saying everyone in the world is under-encouraged. So we made it not just about laughing, but also encouraging teachers that they need, that they're doing some amazing work out there. And so it wasn't just that we're giving them laughter, but giving them encouragement. And I think that's what's interesting about a lot of comedy now, is people are gravitating, and some of the bigger names, it's really positive, positive comedy. And that's what's getting noticed. It's because I think we're so under-encouraged. We need something that will lift us up and make us laugh at the same time. So I think that's where I see it going. Now, Robert may have a completely different
Oh no,
take on it.
I just love hearing.
He's in California, and so they're the
Well,
whole different land out there.
Well, there you go, and there you have it. But I love hearing the different takes on
Mhm.
stand up right now, particularly after COVID-19, and where is stand up right now? And I like your answer because I think that there's a lot of truth to it. But Robert, your opinion?
I totally disagree with both of you. I think you're both wrong.
What?
I would love it to be comedy is uplifting, but I don't think it's true. I just see a darkness taking over this country. I see a
Wow.
darkness in stand-up comedy. A lot of
Okay.
stand-up comics now, they get on stage and they just have to overshare. It's not about comedy so much as it is therapy to get out all their demons, and so they just vomit all over the audience.
We run
I
in
just
very
think that-
different crowds, Robert.
Oh yeah, we do. Now, I'm now that doesn't happen when I'm with church comics, obviously, and I'm out there. But if you're talking about the state of stand-up comedy, just go look at Netflix and look at Showtime and just look at the filth that's coming out. It's because there's a darkness coming in, and I think our whole society is moving toward wickedness, and I think stand-up comedy it's not leading the charge, but it is certainly part of it, and that's why I think we're there to be an antidote to that. We're trying to show there is a different way, and that's what Christianity is. But I don't see the world as getting lighter. I see it as getting darker, and I think stand-up comedy reflects that. So I think it has changed tremendously from the 80s and 90s. From now, there's still clean comics, and 2 weeks I'm going to go see Jerry Seinfeld and Jim Gaffigan.
Oof.
Both clean, both
How'd you
hilarious.
get that ticket?
They're going to fill the Staples Center. It's going to be huge.
Wow.
But which out in Los Angeles, so it's going to be a lot of fun. But when you go to the clubs, there's a darkness, a dark darkness.
I love that answer, and you mentioned Jerry Seinfeld, who's Jewish. I don't know if he's Orthodox or not, but he's Jewish. Slash not a Christian, not a dig. My point is he's a clean comedian. And he was asked, Jerry, you never curse during your show. I mean, do you curse at all? And Jerry said, oh yeah, all the time. I just don't think the stage is the place for it. Amazing. An amazing answer. And if you look at the landscape of stand-up comedians, he's the most lucrative comic by far. He's almost worth $1 billion as a comedian. The closest comedian is Kevin Hart, and he's about $5-6 million off. By the way, I'll take Kevin's money. I'm just saying he's the closest one to Jerry, who's doing it the right way. You don't have to go to the gutter. You don't have to go to the sewer.
Well, Jim Gaffigan's the same way. I mean, Jim Gaffigan's
the same way. Yeah. Brian Regan is another great example of a great clean comic. And Brian Regan, by the way, and I don't know what his religious take is, but I know that he's also a profane person. But he said, I don't find the need for profanity in telling a joke. I mean, wow. And a pure logic. It's like, why do people do that? Once again, as I mentioned earlier, going for that easy laugh, the low-hanging fruit. I don't have to write well. I don't have to think. Just say something stupid. I can tell you right now, after COVID-19, and I like to go to mics to get ready for shows and to build material before I go out and do a show. And one thing I noticed, I'm in Austin, Texas now. I've been here since 2022. Probably been out 9 times, which is really, really poor. And the reason being, there are like comedians everywhere now. Yes. I mean, I go to mic where it used to be like 12 or 15 comics in there. They're like 50, 60 comedians. And I'm like, where do these people come from? And not only that, it's horrible humor. I mean, it's low. It's so degrading. Robert, getting back to the point you were talking about before about the narrative, the story that they just want to get off their chest. And I'm like, what are you talking about? This isn't even funny. But, you think it's humor because it's crass and profane. So, of course, they're going to laugh at that because I said something stupid. But I feel bad for them. And a lot of them are like in their late 20s, early 30s. They're young people. And some of them are younger than that. And you just go, man, this is the state of affairs in our society today with this age group.
But I'll counter that.
Okay. Yes.
Too late. You already had your chance.
Go ahead, Christy.
So Nate Bargatze just announced that he has a label now, that he's putting his label on some clean comics. They filmed it in the spring, I think,
Okay.
or last fall.
Okay.
All at Zanies. I think there were 8 to 10 comics on each show. I think they filmed 4 shows, and all clean comics.
Yeah.
And so
there is definitely a need for clean comedy. Nate Bargatze is one of those guys raised in a Christian home, and he talks about faith, and so does Jim Gaffigan. No, there's a remnant out there.
But
as far as the plethora of people,
right? No, I get it.
Who are all these people? What are they doing? And they're all just vomiting out.
But I think what's interesting about what Nate is doing is Nate is using his name.
Mm-hmm.
He's putting a label. He's putting his label on a group of comedians and saying, so if he's a clean comedian and he's a trusted comedian with his group, with his, with his clientele, then they're going to look at, I think he's doing a ministry in putting out, here's some more clean comedians. So in a way, he's kind of advancing this idea of, I'm going to take my label and add it and promote other clean comedians.
Yeah.
Now, if there's a market for that.
There's a double-edged sword to this as well, because I think after COVID-19, I've sensed the few times that I've been out, people seem to be ready to laugh at.
Right.
You just want to laugh. And unfortunately, you got a lot of these people out there that are vomiting stuff out, but that's okay. I can get out of the house and go to a comedy show. I think that, but now the clean comic has an opportunity to really minister, because people want to laugh. Mm-hmm. They've been tense, they've been upset, and they're worried about the world ending. There's so many issues going on in our world right now. People just want an outlet and a way to just laugh things off. And I noticed after COVID that is kind of what has happened. I mean, audiences are packed. They come in there. You don't, I'm going to get to this in a moment about heckling. You don't really see a lot of negativity. And Robert and Christy, please correct me if I'm wrong. I just haven't noticed as much negativity or potential negativity as existed before COVID. What's your view on that, Christy?
What?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, I've been to a lot of shows where you would encounter a heckler prior to COVID. Right. But I not so much ever since we've gotten back to it.
I think that goes back and forth as well. Now, I'm right now mostly working in churches. I've gotten heckled by, like a toddler, and
yeah.
But I can give them like the stink eye and go, I'm gonna take you out. But so I don't encounter too much heckling in the churches. I could just call down, God's wrath on them, and so that's easy. But I think there are those people that are understanding, look, this is just a person trying to do a job, or they're here to entertain us. However, with the Chris Rock incident, and from the Oscars last year or 2 years ago or whatever.
2 years ago, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, then I think it's on the flip side, even though, like, I can say whatever I want. I've been in shows where it gets out of hand, and you just go, oh my. But I think people that work at those places are very quick if they're used to handling that themselves rather than relying on the comic to do it. But I haven't encountered that as much.
Yeah. I know that
Robert probably gets heckled all the time. So, ask him.
Right now.
I haven't been out a ton since COVID, but the times that I have gone out, it just seems to be a lighter mood in the audiences. And they just seem ready to have a ball. And it just makes my job a lot easier. It seems like it's been easier. But I want to ask you, Robert, because I'm kind of on the subject of heckling. And as a clean comedian, someone who's clean, we represent Christ, and you encounter someone that's trying to, get on your bad side. Secular comedians, they're going to try to destroy you. How do you handle that as a clean comedian dealing with the heckler?
Well, when someone says, my wife puts up with my S, then I immediately go to my thesaurus. I just change the word. I won't repeat back what he said.
Yeah.
I can say crap. I can say, and sometimes I'll just say feces, buttocks, whatever they're saying, I will use the anatomically correct word. But when you deal with hecklers, and they're not hecklers, they're just trying to have fun, because I dive in the audience. To give the overarching view of hecklers, I think there are fewer hecklers today than there were in the past. People want to be part of the show. They like that, but I like to include them. So I jump in the audience and interact, and have certain points where I can ask them questions, so they feel like, oh, good, you're actually going to talk to me. If somebody wants to talk, they'll talk. In the past, it was a drunken revelry, and I'm helping the comedian by being funny, and I'm going to prove that I'm funny. That doesn't seem to be as big of a thing as it used to be. And I don't know if they're more respectful, or we become a passive audience because of so much social media. We just watch, and we're not trained to heckle our phones, because that we just watch. And so people are becoming more passive. And so I find sometimes people don't want to participate. So it has changed. Definitely clubs were different 80s, 90s than they are today. But how do I deal with it as a Christian comedian? And when someone goes off, I just have fun, and I make sure mine is always have fun with, don't make fun of. I will never give them the opportunity to, I will not insult them. But I'll find that little niche, that corner that they're talking about. And if maybe it's relational, maybe it's something about their job, I find something else than the obvious, and I play with that. And the audience always appreciates it. It's always fun. But I've been doing that for 30 years during TV warm-up, having to keep it clean. So it's just a knee jerk. You just understand how to do it. You just don't go there.
Yes, absolutely. You're listening to I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I just want to let everyone know you're listening to the Maurice Brown Comedy Show on Bog Radio with comedians Christy, Conder, and Robert G. Lee. Go ahead, Christy.
I remember Real Rosby used to say that people just want to be acknowledged. And so he had a pattern of asking somebody their name and just saying, hey, nice to meet you. And then he would go, I'm just going to keep going here. You mind if I keep doing the show? So he kind of had a same way of always dealing with it. He said mostly because people just want to be acknowledged.
And I will give the people enough rope to hang themselves. And that's always fun too. When they start talking and someone isn't going to stop talking, I will just stop and just look at them, and I'll look at the rest of the audience, and I'll just go back and I'll say, continue with your conversation. We're over here now. And so by the time it's done, they realize, okay, I've talked too much. And then I'll just pick, me now? Can I go? Okay, here we go. And then I will keep going.
Yeah, I saw Richard Pryor do a show in Santa Barbara back in the 70s, a recording of that, and there were several hecklers in the audience in the back of this huge auditorium where he was performing. And by the way, he was destroying the room. I think they made an album out of this set, but he was destroying. But whenever the laughter kind of died down a little bit and he went for some water, just a moment or two of him not talking, you could hear those hecklers going for it. He didn't even acknowledge them.
Right.
He didn't even bother to waste his time. And I thought that was very interesting, because you don't ever think of a guy like Richard Pryor getting heckled. But I think that's a part of the narrative, dealing with situations like that. How do you respond? Today's comedian will make his entire, a secular comedian for sure, will make his entire set about you if you dare interrupt him or heckle him. Why, Robert? Because you said it already. A lot of times they don't mean any harm. They think they're helping. Okay, they want their 15 seconds of fame because you acknowledge them. You say, you know what, sir, you are right, but there's more. Get a hold of this, and you continue with your joke. And they'll go, he recognized me, and they'll sit down. They won't say another word. But a lot of times they don't mean any harm. But I just think the professional has to remain a professional. Not easy to do, easy to say. But I think as comedians that represent the kingdom, our job is to find a way not to go there where they are.
Mhm.
And it's absolutely a difficult, order, but it can be done. There's no question about it. As I mentioned that, another part of comedy is bombing. And it's like you go up
What is
there.
that again?
It's like, when is that's probably very foreign to you, Robert. But I just want to say, when it happens, it's like, Christy, does it take you a few days to get over something like that, or are you able to just immediately kind of brush it off and get right back on the horse?
Well, back in the day,
Yesterday?
yeah, yesterday, when I bombed yesterday in my shower.
Yeah.
No, when I was kind of first starting out, I hadn't had a big bomb, and my mentor, Bone Hampton, was like, "You got to bomb sometime."
Yeah.
And I'd had a really good show on Friday night, and I was feeling good. And then Saturday night, it was bad. I mean, because it was a restaurant and they were serving during, while you're standing up there.
Really bad. Yeah.
Really bad. It was I was like 4 inches from the first table, and they were, clanking things, and they said they had a light, a light for us, and it was just this light bulb in the back. I mean, it was so bad.
Yeah.
I actually ran off the stage. It was just the front. I just said one last joke and left, and I was like, it was so bad, and
Yeah.
I was so upset. I called Bone, and I was like, I bombed, and he started laughing.
Yeah.
Just laughed and laughed at me, and I thought, this is not funny. This is horrible. I'm terrible.
So, Christy, how did you manufacture through that?
Well, he was like, okay, tell me what you did. Tell me all. He made me walk through it.
Yeah.
And then it was like, you're fine, but you need to get back up on stage.
Yes.
And so I was like, okay, then you're like, I'm quitting forever. Well, Robert's never said that, but yeah. And now I go, we'll
Very
try
good.
again next time,
Hey, there it is. There it is, Christy. Robert, how about yourself?
He's never bombed ever.
That is a huge lie. What you find is that comedians are a very sensitive lot, and it's very funny how we put up jokes to protect our very fragile egos. And when you don't do well, it just sucks the life out of you. And so and the first comedian or first story any comedian does with another comedian is like, what's your worst story? And so we try and one up each other, and we all have horrible, horrible, horrible bombing stories, and they become funny because tragedy plus time equals comedy. But there's a couple things. One of them, I was on a ship a while ago, and it was after a long day. Everybody was already on the cruise, and they were off on the shore, and they were tired, and they came back, and it was a very old crowd the first show, and I just couldn't connect with them, and God just kind of whispered, because I rely on him, and it was just this: you're being paid to rehearse right now, and so flip this. What could you do differently? So I flipped some things around, changed it, and the 9 o'clock show was killer because they were a younger crowd, and they weren't for some reason they weren't tired. They were used to actually staying up past 9, and they had a great time. But all this comes down to, I learned a lesson a couple years ago. I was down in San Diego. It was hot. The room was stifling. There was one fan, but it wasn't doing anything. It was stagnant. And I followed a very angry lesbian comedian. There's no other way to put it. That's who she was. And I knew my material was not going to match up to hers because I couldn't go there. And when it was done, and I struggled through it, it was adequate, nothing more. And I was just depressed, and God just impressed on me. You did that on your own, didn't you? And I went,
wow.
I did that on my own. I didn't go up there. I didn't ask for it. So what I've done now, and the way I try to be proactive, is anytime I go out on stage, I say, I'm not going out by myself. God, you're my partner. And I know I'm not trying to over spiritualize it, but that helps me, because then not all the responsibilities on me. And I say, God, bring things to my mind, help my, curtail anything angry, make sure my wit is strong. You help remind me of the next bit. And it just feels like it's a partnership. And I feel so much better and less pressure on me when I know I'm doing what I'm called to do, and I go out there as a team rather than just by myself. Because then I don't leave with, I was great. It was like, okay, we did that one, didn't we? And so it just, psychologically, it helps me a lot. It really does.
I don't know if it was Rick Roberts or the great Robert G. Lee who told me one time that it was basically a immature comedian will walk off the stage on a bomb and say, well, it was the audience's fault, or it was the maitre d's fault, or, you know, or it was the comic before me, it was their fault, they didn't set it up right, or whatever. That's an immature comedian. A mature comedian will walk off and go, just like what Robert said, what didn't work? Where can I flip? Where, you know, can I redo the order of the set? Maybe I could have I think Rick talked about, you start just jump starting different lines to see what's going to connect. Yes. I don't have that many jokes, but you know, it was you work. Yeah. And that's, and a weaker comedian will just blame it on everything else rather than really look at what they're doing and their material and how they're structuring and work at it to make it better. So you take the bomb and you work it to come up with something better. So I always thought that was brilliant advice.
Well, it's a humbling experience, and it's something that's necessary because of the arrogance that can develop.
Yep.
Where you feel like, you know, I really got this thing figured out. That's a big mistake to ever think, oh yeah, I got it now. I went on I was in Boca Raton, Florida about I don't know, 6, 7 years ago. My wife said, just go do some comedy. She just let me go on a 2-week, you know, stint of stand-up, and I was doing really, really well. And I was at a barbecue the night before a show, and I was telling this joke about, it was just an inside joke, and everybody thought it was hilarious. And one of the guys said, you should tell that joke tomorrow. And I went, sure. Now, you don't tell inside jokes on stage. You don't tell inside jokes on stage. But I was so arrogant. Right. I went up there and I, like an idiot, and I did it. And the only person that was laughing in the audience was him. I went, oh.
Set you up.
And he was laughing at you.
Exactly.
He may have been laughing at me, Robert, which is even worse. But no, I mean, you have to have those experiences where you go, yeah, let's calm down. You're not that good. No, you're not as good as you thought you were, are you? And then you just kind of refocus, humble down, and get back to the basic comedy 101 stuff. Do what you always do before you prepare. Don't get arrogant. And I think Bob Newhart put it in a nutshell for me. I don't know if Bob Newhart is still alive. I know he was in his 90s when I heard him say this a few years ago. He said, I still get nervous before I go up.
Mm.
You go, Bob Newhart? Nervous?
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, and I think when you lose that intensity, you know, I think that is cause for concern. Like, you know, you should be amped up before you get up there. And it shouldn't be one. And I like what you said too. Make sure you go up there with the Lord.
Yeah.
You know,
absolutely.
don't go, oh yeah, I'm gonna kill tonight. I got this. Well, yeah. You may have to learn that the hard way. You don't got this.
Not about you.
Yeah,
no. Michael Jr. said this, and different people said it. But you don't go up to get laughs; you go up to give laughs. And so, if your attitude is right, and when Christy says, "Well, who do you blame?" I always tell my students is you blame yourself first, then you blame the material, then you blame the audience. Most amateur comics always go right to the audience. Like, no, you were off tonight. It wasn't memorized. You weren't smooth. The performer wasn't there. And the material, the writer let you down because he didn't write the material correctly, he or she.
Yeah.
And so it's like you cover that first, and then you go, no, I was on, the material's good. It's worked before. That audience was bad. Then you go, okay, then it's easier just to knock the dust off your shoes and keep going.
Right.
Yes. Ladies and gentlemen, you are listening to the Maurice Brown Comedy Show on Bog Radio in association with 24 Flicks, talking with Christy, Conder, and Robert G. Lee. Well, guys, I had a lot more I wanted to discuss. I know you guys got to get out of here, but
Flies
want
by.
yes, I want to ask you this though before we get out. And I'll start with you, Christy, once again. Ladies first. What advice do you have out there for a young comedian out there that says, you know what, I want to do it the clean way and I'm committed to it? What kind of advice do you have for them?
Take Robert G. Lee's class.
There you go. Let me write that down.
Yeah.
Hold on. Let me write that down.
I would also say, I mean, watch, the clean comedians and also find your own voice. So, watch what they do. But you've got to learn what they're doing, how they choose words, how they structure a joke. Don't, just because you're funny with a group of people doesn't necessarily translate to stage. So you've got to recognize the difference. I think what's most fun when people ask me like, what's it like being a comedian? And so I give them a few little insights to, that people aren't just up there making stuff up, and they are shocked. Yeah. And I'm like, no, this is writing and performing. That's right. That's right. So I usually give people a little hint. I go, so here's a fun little trick: is just start finding funny words. And play a game. I tell a lot of moms this: play a game in the car where kids come up with different words for different things, and just play a word game. That's a good place to start, is trying to find different words for different things. Like Robert said in his show, he'll come up with an alternative name to whatever somebody was heckling him with. So that's just a good exercise. But I would say take a class and see what you don't know, really. Yes. And then see how hard it is.
Robert G. Lee, your advice.
Yes, a class is a good thing because it'll truncate a lot of years on the road. But whenever I talk to comedians, like they're just a long litany of things you have to do. You have to find your stage persona. There's ways to do that, and then you have to learn the craft of writing jokes. And you have to find that how to do it, because if you don't, you don't know how to edit. You don't know how to get to the punchline. And so all this comes up to one simple word, and that's called ammunition. You must have a lot of ammunition, and that ammunition is another routine, another joke, another bit that you can pull out when that other one's not working, and you can work with any audience. And you do that by constantly working. What do I tell people? Are you the bottom line is, are you serious about comedy? And when you do get serious about comedy, then you start exploring it. Everything that Christy was talking about. You watch other comedians, you start, you write that down. There you go. Get serious about comedy. But when I come to ammunition, it's like, well, how much time do you have? When someone tells me they've got 20 minutes, I know they really have 10 and maybe 5 really good. You've just got to keep working and working and working until you get an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. And the way you get hired is by having tons of material. I go on cruises now, and they want you to have 2 clean 45-minute sets. That means you've got to have about twice that to winnow it down to a good 45-minute set. And most comics think, I got my 10 minutes, I'm going to coast. It's like, if you coast, you're dead. You got to comedians are like sharks. You got to keep moving to stay alive. You can never stop.
Love it. So. Great analogy, Robert. Great analogy. One of the great stand-ups of all time, a one-liner, Rodney Dangerfield. Rodney Dangerfield started out in vaudeville. Well, his dad was in vaudeville, and he thought he was going to be pretty funny. Turned out he wasn't that funny. But he never stopped writing material. And it was years down. I mean, he had all this material that he had written. And, I think he ended up, getting some gigs and started cooking. And he ended up on the Tonight Show because Johnny Carson had heard about Rodney Dangerfield. And he invited him onto the show. Killed. Not only did he kill, and you rarely saw this on Johnny Carson, he killed, and then he went over to the chair, and he was even funnier, if you can imagine that. And he had Carson going, but it was based on, getting back to what you said about writing. I mean, this is something that you have got to do as a comic. Chrissy, you already said it. You don't just go up there and just have a conversation. No. We make it look that way because we've done the writing. and so that's great advice by both of you. Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to the Maurice Brett Comedy Show. on Bog Radio with Christy Conder and Robert G. Lee, two members of the Comedy in the Kingdom tour coming your way next summer. And if you want to help out, support, sponsor, contact me at Maurice Brown Comedy Hour at gmail.com or Maurice Brown LLC at gmail.com, or just give me a call at 703-357-6675. We'll just chop it up. Also, you could see this show on KCHF TV 11 in Albuquerque, New Mexico, every Saturday at midnight, and then again at 8 p.m. Christy, Robert, thank you guys so much for taking time out to talk with us about
pleasure.
comedy.
Sorry we have to leave a little bit early, but you can fill it with our clips. That'll be fine.
We will definitely let our audience get an idea of how funny you guys are on stage. I'm going to play a couple of your clips, but guys, thank you so much. May the peace of Christ be with you and your families. God bless you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Bye.
Robert G. Lee and Christy Conder on the Maurice Brown Comedy Show. And as promised, we are going to play a snippet of Christy's routine as the opener on the Mike Huckabee Show. Very funny stuff.
But I love kids, because they ask the greatest questions. Like I got this question. Hey, Miss Christy, if David had seen Bathsheba in the shower, would she have been Shower Sheba? That's a good question. But it's going to be a long Sunday morning when you get this. Could I talk to you for just a second? Oh, no. Just letting you know, my wife's out of town, so I kept the kids up a little bit late last night. And then this morning, I gave them donuts and Yoo-hoo for breakfast. And I forgot to give the little one his medicine today, so he might be a little more active, if you know what I mean. And we're going to stay for all 3 services, if that's okay with you. And then we're going to go over to a birthday party at Chuck E. Cheese afterwards, so they're a little excited about that. But you have a blessed morning. Pastor's kids.
Christy Conder on the Maurice Brown Show, comedy show, brought to you. Actually, it's actually not brought to you by anybody yet, but that's coming soon. But you're listening to Bog Radio in association with 24 Flicks. And we also had Robert G. Lee on the show a little bit earlier. And before we get out of here, we're going to play a snippet of Robert G. Lee's Dry Bar comedy special in Provo, Utah. Check him out.
Thank you very much. Before I dive in, I just want to give you a couple disclaimers. I just want to apologize for my carbon footprint, income and inequality, my white privilege, and just being a man in general. I've never groped anyone, but other men have, so shame on me. I'm sorry. Apparently, my demographic is responsible for every problem in the world today. So let me just take a moment to apologize for everything. I'm sorry for, thank you, the high cost of healthcare, for global warming, that AK-47s are legal, but in California, plastic straws are not. I'm sorry that you were all told you could be whatever you wanted to be when you grew up. How's that working out for you? The world is not filled with cowboys and ballerinas, and it is my fault. I'm sorry. Ladies, I just want to apologize for so much. The pain of childbirth, the fact that society pressures you into shaving and waxing everything, which I enjoy, so I'm a hypocrite, so I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry. White men, I just want to say, time's up. You had a good run, but your dynasty has been supplanted by diversity, so sorry for that. And whatever has bothered you in the past or in the future, I will take blame for it. It is my fault, so we can all move on. Are we good? All right.
Woo! Yeah, you gotta love it. That was Robert G. Lee, who will be a part of the Comedy in the Kingdom tour coming your way next summer, and Christy Conder, who you had an opportunity to listen to as well during the show. She will also be a part of the tour along with people like Leland Clausen and Willie Brown and Valina Metcalf and Donnie the Entertainer, Michelle Van Dusen, Felicia Frazier, Joey Aiello, and the list goes on and on. I'm Maurice Brown. You are listening to the Maurice Brown Comedy Show on Bog Radio in association with 24 Flicks. And once again, in courtesy of KCHF TV in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And if you came in late and you're like, oh man, I missed the show, listen, it's okay. You can listen to this show in its entirety on Spotify, where all major podcasts are heard. So until we meet again, everyone, may the peace of Jesus Christ be with you and your families. God bless you.